welcome to another episode of Seed Speaks. My name is Alex Martin, and I am the editor of Seed World magazine. And today I'm so happy to be your host. Last week, you got to hear my coworker, Rebecca Carmeli-Peslak, who chatted with us a little bit more about how weather patterns impact what we're seeing in grocery stores week after week. This week, we're taking a little bit of a different kind of turn of events with our topic. When you think of the realm of vegetables, breeders have a lot to consider when they're breeding, including that aspect of eating vegetables and ensuring that they're tasty and that consumers want to eat it. Because of that, more breeders are turning to experts to help, chefs. So today we are diving into the topic of the chef's influence, inspiring plant breeders to unleash culinary wonders. Sorry, guys, that's a hard word for me to pronounce some days. To discuss more, I'd like to introduce our two panelists. We have Irwin Goldman, who is a professor in the Department of Horticulture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Michael Mazourek, excuse me, Michael, I got it the second time. Calvin Noyes-Keeney, Associate Professor of Vegetable Breeding at Cornell University. So Irwin, Michael, thank you both for joining me today. I figured before we get started on our discussion, we could start with some introductions. So Irwin, I'd like you to kick us off today and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your research.
Well, thanks, Alex, and thanks so much for having me on the show today. You know, I've been breeding vegetables here in the Department of Horticulture at the University of Wisconsin for 31 years. And in particular, I focus on carrot, onion, and table beet. And in addition to breeding for disease resistance and horticultural qualities and productivity and all sorts of things, yield, for example, we are very, very interested in culinary traits and have been working on culinary traits in all three of these crops in different ways over the last few decades.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Irwin. And then Michael, we'd love to hear from you as well. Give us a little bit of insight to yourself and your program.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the chance to be here. So starting out, I grew up in a farm background. It was very important to me to figure out how to help people with the challenges of growing the food we all enjoy. So that's led to find me here as a vegetable breeder. My emphasis tends to be squash, peppers, cucumbers, and peas. I'm also on the board of directors at OSSI, the Open Source Seed Initiative, and as formerly a co-founder of Row 7 Seeds, specialize in connecting chefs and plant breeders and growers to try to get more delicious produce out in the world.
That makes me so excited. I would love to have more delicious produce out in the world because I just love eating it and figuring out what tastes the best. So before we all get too hungry, let's go ahead and dive in with our first question for today. I figured since we're kind of talking about engaging chefs while breeding, excuse me, I'd like to hear how you both work and chat with chefs in your research program. Maybe we'll start with Irwin and then we'll pivot to Michael, but I'd love to hear what y'all are doing in your programs.
So I first have to give credit to some colleagues, and one of them is Dan Barber, who is, along with Michael, a co-founder of Row 7 Seeds. He's a well-known chef. Steve Jones, who's a plant breeder at Washington State University. Both of them encouraged me and encouraged other breeders to begin having more formal relationships with chefs and other culinary professionals as part of our breeding program. Prior to the influence of Dan and Steve, I think we interacted with chefs in an ad hoc way. We would ask them the kinds of things they were interested in. We would ask them maybe to taste some of the things we were breeding, but it wasn't systematically brought into our breeding programs until probably the last decade. And it's during that time that we are actually having an ongoing regular dialogue with people who spend their life working on preparing dishes and preparing food for others, and who have great insight into the culinary properties of food. So while I can measure something in the lab, it's also going to be important for me to have a regular interaction with a chef who is used to working with that thing in the kitchen.
That makes a lot of sense, Irwin. Michael, I know you probably work a little bit differently in your lab. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. Yeah. And so in my group, we're tasting everything, and we have thousands of plants in the field, and everything that might make the cut we taste. We don't want to accidentally overlook something, throw it out earlier on, and just taste what's left, and not have a chance to taste everything that's might be fantastic out there. So as I work with chefs, we're looking to get some other contributions from them than the flavor that I think most people expect. So two quick examples: as I was working with tromboncino squash and trying to figure out, growers wanted me to work more with it, and the chefs were loving it. It was again, as in the Dan Barber in the kitchen at Blue Hill, showing me, well, instead of how I was working with it typically, how about trying to treat it like meat and brine it and sear it, and then it was delicious. So now we check all our squash that way. They were also working on some gluten-free penne pasta out of the squash leaf petioles, and so with that, they showed me what they were doing, and I said, aha, I know how I can do this better. Show me what you're doing, and then I could work in the field and bring them back something. And so I think what those examples go to illustrate is what I'm really looking forward to is understanding what are they doing for the presentation, what are the techniques they're applying, and what do they look for in the cultivars that meet those. And so just getting insight there to make me a better plant breeder. Once I can kind of, when they generously share their insight, then I am going out into my field with that whole new vision for what I have in my field.
That's very fair. I love that you brought up that presentation aspect of it too, because for professional chefs, making sure those vegetables look as good as they taste is just as important, I think, sometimes. So thank you so much, Michael.
We've had a similar thing, Alex, in our program that Michael is referring to, that the visual, I think because humans eat with their eyes, that sometimes the focus on flavor it becomes secondary to the way the plant looks, to the colors, the pigments, and consumer preference could be driven by the visual as a stronger pull than necessarily the flavor, which we've been focusing on. And so I think that the appreciation for the importance of both of those things is critical for the plant breeder.
Yeah.
And that's how also I diverge from the sensory approaches too. When you do a formal sensory approach, you're told to try to mute out all the other conflicting sensory inputs, just focus on what you're supposed to be studying. And in the kitchen, in the restaurant, the chefs are looking at how can they work with the whole thing. So exactly. Irwin.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's probably been the biggest take-home message for us, that in the lab, we have an assay, we have a machine, we have a way of measuring, let's say, a particular trait. We can measure the amount of sugars in a plant, or we can measure a particular volatile compound that contributes to flavor. But and that's great for a scientist to have a tool. But in the end, what's driving the joy and the food decisions and all that is a much more complex set of characteristics. And so I think without that perspective that the chef can bring, or without that perspective of what's in the kitchen and on the table, the plant breeder probably is focusing on too narrow of a slice.
Absolutely. No, thank you both so much for that. I think that's so important to add in, that this visual component is so compelling along with the taste component. I know I've been reading for years about this pink pineapple that Del Monte had developed. I've never seen it before. I found it in the grocery store maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I looked at my husband and I said, we have to buy that. I've been reading about it all over the place. And he was like, it's just a pineapple. And I was like, it's pink though. And we did not end up taking it home with us, but one day we might. But to kind of continue on that conversation a little bit, Irwin, we talked a little bit about this importance for feedback, for engagement with these chefs. And how you as a breeder can only do so much with your assays and things like that. Why do you think it's so important to kind of engage and continuously get this feedback from chefs while you're working on your breeding programs?
I mean, because I think, ultimately what we're doing with vegetable breeding, it's probably true for a lot of plant breeding, is we're trying to improve the crop for a particular end use. And in our case, the end use is a human who is eating this vegetable as part of a complex diet. They're interested in the color, shape, flavor, texture, nutrients, all of these things. Sometimes it's a deeper connection with the food, a cultural connection with the food. And so I think that as compelling as it is for us to work on things that we know we can measure, to work on things that we know we can test, to work on things that we know we can modify through breeding, we must admit, I think, that it's a more complex portfolio. So if we don't have taste panels with real humans, if we don't interact with culinary professionals, we are undoubtedly going to miss. And I know Michael has some great stories about this. We're going to miss some really important traits. And that's one of the biggest things, the biggest takeaways from this for us is that we end up missing, if we just stick to ourselves, just as a breeding group, we will miss some very, very important traits. We will simply throw them away. And interacting with that larger group, I think it highlights things in our breeding program that are worth saving and worth expanding on. And it also highlights things in our breeding program that we should probably get rid of, that we are keeping for our own reasons. So I think it has a humbling effect, but it also has an enabling effect.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Irwin. And Michael, with your approach, you mentioned that you're working with chefs and learning kind of these these cooking techniques from chefs as well. I can't say the word culinary all the time. I don't know why my mouth doesn't want to say it. But why did you decide to focus on these kind of lessons in the kitchens approach? What does it really help you do for your program?
Yeah, and so chefs are incredibly busy. They're trying to do so much and also so generous, trying to help a lot of other people much of the time. And so in that, so what do they really have the bandwidth for? And so I can't bring them the 1,000 plants from the field, but I can bring them a couple. And so how do I make sure I get those right few that are really going to delight? So in academia, we often do sabbaticals where we go off to a different institution to learn a new skill set we can bring back to our programs. So I kind of look at it like doing a sabbatical in the kitchen. So I can see firsthand what they're trying to do, how they're going about it, and be able to bring that back to my team. But also, it's not just in the kitchen, but there's the front of the house staff too. You can learn a lot from, as I was able to present and serve some dishes alongside people that just excel at kind of that customer service, the people skills that the front of house people have so much of. I got to learn also, how can I best explain to someone really quickly what is impactful about what I'm trying to do. And so I got to hear from how they would do it. I got to try it my way. I got to be critiqued on it. It was fantastic. But also we still want to aggregate some experiences. So there's a grower I work with, Zaid at Norwich Meadows Farms, is a phenomenal grower, focused on flavor and quality. And as he works with the chefs he sells to and some great restaurants, he's also then aggregating a bunch of feedback that ends up coming back to me as I have on-farm breeding projects on his farm. So we have some focused and some broad.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. We got in an audience question. I think this would be it's a good and important question, I think, before we continue the rest of our discussion. It's from Ashley Robinson. How do you find chefs to work with? Like if I was a chef looking to work with plant breeders, how would you recommend going about it? Thank you so much, Ashley, for that question. I'll let either one of you take a stab at it, whoever would like to go first. And if
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So I think step one is starting to understand a little bit about the chefs and culinary community. There's a great diversity out there, but I think one of the things to start to notice is which chefs might you share some similar ideology with, some similar goals. Look at menus to see which chefs are really featuring, working a lot with the crops that you might also be interested in working with. And then, as chefs are incredibly busy, it's a very high pressure environment, trying to just understand more about what might be the windows in their time. Don't show up at 4:30, 5 o'clock with something. So there's some timing too. And also be appreciating with everything that might be motivating the chefs. There's a great diversity. It's not like one group. There's, it's in many different people within that. There's also perhaps maybe looking to see where you can find some more people that are really looking the community-minded approach. There's some that really do such a great job of uplifting others. I mean, I've been a great beneficiary of that. And so I think that's where you can find the best chances to have the opportunity for a connection and to make a connection, at least in my experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. Irwin, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, that was a great, great comment there Michael made. I would add to it, that one of the things we've started doing is growing some plots at all of our locations that have a series of our breeding materials, our latest cultivars that we've developed, and then approaching chefs who we know are trying to work with local farmers or work with local growers who are producing material for them. We think maybe they'd be also interested in working with local plant breeders, and then bringing in August or September, when we have things ready from the field, bringing a bag of each one of these things to them and saying, here are some things that we're working with, and let them just experiment with it. And just dropping stuff off at the kitchen and starting the conversation that way. And that's been really fun because there's no pressure, there's no commitment. It's just like, hey, here's some unique materials that we're working with. Take these into your kitchen and see if there's anything here that interests you. And we have one coming up this summer where one of those restaurants, a local restaurant that's been promoting its work with local farmers, is going to cook a dish that they're going to advertise on their menu as also locally bred, which is kind of fun. So it's an ongoing conversation with all of them.
Hey, that takes the like farm to fork aspect of things a little bit farther. You not only get to see where it is farmed, you get to now see and know and understand where it was bred and how it was made. I think I love that aspect.
And that's, I have to give Dan Barber credit for that. Like he was very early on trying to bring that into his restaurants, to talk with diners about the fact that this variety that you're eating, or this crop that you're eating, didn't just show up in nature, but it was selected by someone over a long period of time for particular characteristics. And I do think that maybe that promotion of the breeder in that way, I realize that this could sound self-serving, but I do think that bringing that connection to the diner could be also another really good learning experience for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much to you both for that. Now, Michael, I know one of the things that you mentioned to me while we were preparing for this discussion was about some of the exciting things that you can learn from these techniques in the kitchen can also help you better interpret the kind of ingredient you're creating, say like the carrots, the squashes, the things like that. When you're working both in the kitchen and the greenhouse, what are you personally searching for in some of your varieties?
So I'm personally, it's a lot of what I'm doing is probably, if you've seen Citizen Kane, getting rosebud, that pure childhood flavors. So in my garden, as soon as young as I can remember, I was growing squash, peppers, and peas and snap peas. And guess what? Now I'm the plant breeder at Cornell working on those. And so there's this really kind of ability for some of those flavors, when you get them right, to kind of really teleport you back kind of that time. So I'm looking to try to create these ideal flavors, things that I'd want to grow in my garden, and things that when my kids taste, they'll like Dad's version of it. So personally, selfishly, there's a lot of that. And I think tied into that, though, is as I'm looking at those flavors, to bring another chef into it, Ratatouille, if you've seen the movie. So there's a similar idea of like these flavors prepared in just a way that really presents the vegetable kind of as it is, can be really powerful. So we focus a lot on chefs here, but also, big shout out to the grandmothers like mine that showed me a lot of how she was cooking with really specific ingredients that sometimes to be able to get certain flavors and such. So I think there's it's just that great sense of getting a vegetable you just want to eat because it's delicious is the big driver for me.
Yeah, that's a new way of bringing family business into your work. You get to look back on some of the ingredients and the recipes that your family gives to you as well. I love that. So Irwin, we talked a lot about the feedback you hear from local chefs in your area. I'm kind of interested where we just talked a little bit more about what Michael personally kind of looks for in his varieties. What do you find some chefs locally in your area are kind of looking for or hoping for in a variety? And how do you work to achieve some of those desires? I'm
Yeah.
sure they do not happen fast.
Yeah, it's, I would say what we've learned from that is that there's no unanimity. The chefs all have, just as you might expect, different things that they bring and different preferences. So I have to admit, and I'm not proud of this, I think as a breeding program looked more at the consumer as a monolith. We looked at the consumer as, okay, consumers are going to like, sweet carrots. They're going to like low pungency onions. They're going to like low earthy beets. And while that's true to some degree, I think what we learned from the chefs is that the chefs have much more nuanced perspectives. They can taste a flavor or taste something and see its possibilities mixed with other foods, mixed with, in a dish in ways that we couldn't. So I guess that I don't have one single answer to what the chefs wanted, but I guess what it taught me was that my sort of narrow perspective of, hey, let's just create a low pungency onion. Okay, something to be said for that, but not in a vacuum and not without the contributions of the ways others would look at that.
No, I think that's very valid to say, Irwin. Not everyone has the same taste palette. So, of course, not everyone would probably be looking for the same things in different varieties. I'm sure there is quite a lot of variability.
Yeah. And if anything, we learned in one of the primary traits we were selecting for in the lab, which has to do with the earthy flavor of table beets, which we know some people really don't care for while other people care for. What the chefs taught us was that really, ultimately, earthiness is the way we measured it in the lab was really not the main thing. We sort of made it the main thing in our heads as we were working on the project, but with the chefs, we realized, no, it's far more complex than that. It's the interplay of the earthiness with the sweetness. It's the interplay of the earthiness with other factors. And so I guess it has the effect of realizing that things are more complex perhaps than you thought.
No, I love that. That's perfect.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time thinking about genotype by environment interaction in plant breeding. And I think what Irwin's talking about, we're just getting now around to understanding if it's going to go roasted in the oven versus steamed versus those are all different environments for a crop to be in. And then it's also, what other tastes are within the crop or what is it going to be paired with? And so I think that's a place where having a guide can really help you develop new varieties much faster and much better.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you. I think we have enough time left that we can ask you both one more question. And it's a question that I'm going to direct again to both of you. How do you see this relationship between chefs and plant breeders evolving in the future? What would you like to see, if anything? How would you like this to evolve further? Is there anything that you really are just wishing and wanting in this relationship? I'm going to put it out there. I don't know who would like to go first, but I'll let y'all take the wheel for it.
I'll jump in. So when I first started working with flavor, it wasn't that people weren't looking for it, as I was actively discouraged from working on it as a plant breeder. Everyone said, well, how is there going to be any benefit to anyone in the food system from doing this? Everything is just sold as a commodity. So you can breed a new pepper, it goes in the pepper bin. You breed a new tomato, it goes in the tomato bin. So working with chefs has both been the license to be able to work with flavor, and also the chefs are really interested. They're interested in new ingredients. They're interested in the narratives, the backgrounds. They're interested in community and how they can support their local community. And so that takes you to a big thing in the culinary world of terroir. So they want things to speak of the place. I think Irwin was talking about in the locally grown, locally bred. So I think there's a great opportunity where chefs can be this fantastic ally in diversifying what we have and the flavors and making local regions unique, get us away from that commodity system where everything is unidentifiable other than like which commodity group it's in. And I think this helps improve the local farm economies, helps improve local diets, and just broadly, I think it is a really great way to elevate the role of vegetables in an omnivore diet. And chefs are definitely leading that opportunity for us. We should be very grateful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And Irwin, I'll let you take the last word.
Well said. Well said. You know, one of the things you asked about kind of what to expect and what's the future like. And one of the things I think I see is that the plant breeder, if I go back 50 years, let's say, or 40 years, the plant breeder may have been working more in isolation than the plant breeder is today. Today, I guess we're doing more what I would call participatory plant breeding. And some of that is with chefs and other culinary professionals where we're in there working on what might be good. We're also doing that in a lot of other ways with farmers. We're doing more participatory work. We are, in some ways, it depowers the plant breeder. The plant breeder is no longer the center of the universe. The plant breeder is doing a very important role in crossing and selecting and maintaining populations, but with a diverse clientele of input into the process. And I have to believe that that's only going to be good for humanity, that humanity is going to benefit because we're taking a broader set of inputs into our breeding work. And I hope that trend continues, frankly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Irwin. Irwin, Michael, like I said, that is all the time we have today. But thank you both so much. I wish we could talk about food and how chefs, respond to breeders and how breeders respond to chefs on every single Seed Speaks we do, because this is so fun, but it has also made me incredibly hungry. So I'm very excited to right after this. Thank you to everyone who watched us in their spare time and their lunch. And I hope you were able to take away some fun knowledge today about the relationship between plant breeders and chefs. And if you like this topic, make sure you tune in next week. Rebecca is going to be back again, helping us learn a little bit more about how technology has driven farmers forward. We'll see you all there then. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.